also has not missed my notice that a lot of the younger cats out there, they tend to be heavily into quote-unquote geek culture. You see, the reason that I will occasionally reference a movie or a comic book or what have you is because of the fact that I try to reach you where you are. See, when I reference things like Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. If I tried to take some references from The Invention of the White Race by Theodore Allen, you wouldn't know what the hell I was talking about. I'm very reluctant to mention things like Gideon Spies because, as Dr. John Henry Clarke wisely observed, a lot of black people, a lot of people tell me that they want reading lists. You know, oh, well, if you give us a reading list, as Dr. John Henry Clarke said, he had done that for years, decades, and black people would be vaguely intrigued by a reading list, but then they would never motivate themselves to actually read it. So they're interested in the abstract, but they're not really serious about it. I've been through that one more times than you would imagine, long before I got onto YouTube, and that's the reason why I don't spend a whole lot of time continuing it here. You already pretty much know what kind of books that you need to be reading. One leads to the next, the next, the next. Pay attention to the ones that get mentioned, and that tells you where you should go. You can also start with a bibliography of books. That's the portion at the back that shows sources that a writer uses. But I'm getting a little off topic here. I know that a lot of my subscribers happen to be younger than myself. And I also understand something that a lot of the younger cats don't get. And unfortunately, it seems we fail to get it across to them because they watch too much television, read too many comic books. When I was young, the Black Panther Party was still largely relevant. The escapist kumbaya culture that would be ushered in by the white media in the 1980s hadn't been invented yet. And yes, I was born before the 1980s. Most of you, especially younger ones, you were born well after 1980. So I have a perspective on this that you don't. I wasn't raised by comic books and such. Yeah, I liked Transformers growing up, but the truth of the matter is I had already had a lot of people who had gotten the political aspect of things across to me. I didn't invest in it like a lot of you have. And as I said before, I guess the problem happens to be that a lot of young people, especially in a culture that has become more and more atomized and more individualistic, and people just basically trying to create their own little worlds and hide within them. These young people grew up without a whole lot of friends, per se, and their comic books and movies became their friends. And they bought into that stuff. That's very dangerous. Because these comic books and movies are telling you lies. They're telling you falsehoods. They're giving you a sugar-coated version of white supremacy, and a lot of people bought into it. Now, this is not me attempting to pull rank on anyone. And by the way, before I go any further, I want to say, if anybody in the comment section calls themselves trying to call anybody out or trying to point the finger at anyone in particular, that's going to be instant grounds to get blocked. The only person around here who gets to do that is me.
Professor.
Now, that said, some of the younger cats, I guess, were a little surprised by what it was that I said. I guess my comments struck a little bit too close to home, which is good. What the hell do you expect? People getting killed out here. This is not a game.
Man.
I don't have time to sit here and just be affectionate, and I'm going to be so attached to comic books and movies and sci-fi and stuff. Man, there's a time for diversion, a small time, and then there's a time to work. Black people always making excuses for playtime. For black people, it's never the wrong time to be having fun. Doesn't matter if a black man just got shot down in Ferguson, you'll have Negroes dancing in the streets. Same as in Baltimore, New York, Philly, Chicago, D.C. The race soldiers are in front of you with armored vehicles and 60mm machine guns, and here you are, dancing in jail. So this mentality is a disease that I am trying to root out, and younger cats keep making excuses for it. And to an extent, damn right I'm going to pull rank on you on this. I am not one of your elders. You already know what I think about elders in the black community, but I am your older brother. And that being the case, I know some things you don't. I understand some things that you don't. And it would behoove you to listen to your elder brothers, especially when they've been right. You are committing the same mistake that the baby boomers made. The baby boomers were arrogant too. The baby boomers grew up during an age talk to the average baby boomer who grew up after World War II, and they'll tell you that they were growing up on a steady diet of Howdy Doody and the Mouseketeer Club. That's how a whole bunch of black people, particularly black females, got indoctrinated with the idea that they could be part of the dominant society. They saw Annette Funicello and they thought, that's me up there. Never mind the fact that Walt Disney was a dyed-in-the-wool racist, but guess what? You couldn't tell the baby boomers that. You couldn't tell them anything. Now, let's go ahead and talk about this geek media that so many of you have bought into. Because some of you have only in recent days, I guess, recovered from the comments that I made to the point where you were able to do some sort of video response, or at least some sort of video addition to it, where you had something to say on the issue. And while I do respect some of the people who have made these comments, I also heard some things that I should not have been hearing. Now, again, this is not to start rancor or to create any bad blood. The thing is, situations get real here. And we don't have time for us to be continuing to make the same old mistakes, just tap dancing around the issue, and basically we're going to say, well, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Philando Castile was murdered. His murderer got away. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. The white media has been aiding and abetting the killers, telling the public we need laws to go after Bill Cosby, but ain't saying a damn thing about laws to go after killer cops. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. The white media, these same TV stations that you see putting out these lies, are owned by the exact same companies that own the studios that put out the movies we love, and they own the companies and publishers that put out the comic books and the novels and other stuff we escape into. I don't see white supremacy in isolation. I see the big picture, and I've been trying to get you to do it too, but apparently thinking makes black people's brains hurt. And I'm hearing a bunch of excuses when what I need to be hearing is people taking the hard line. Now, there's an old saying that if there's nothing beneath you, then there's nothing above you either. That's good advice, man. Now, for a lot of you out there, a lot of the people who fit to the Negro nerd contingent, by the way, Negro nerds need to be remembered. It's one thing to have a black person who indulges in geek culture from time to time, but for these guys out there who call out the white supremacy in media, whether it's Black Panther, whether it's Star Trek, what have you, if they sit there and defend it and say, I don't care, that's a freaking Negro nerd. That's somebody who's completely signed over their autonomy to a white media IP. You ain't much different or much better than a bootleg. In fact, that's what you pretty much are. And the favorite excuse to shore that I keep hearing is, well, brother, it ain't that serious. It's just one movie. Black Panther, just one movie. It's just one movie, so it don't matter. I heard that from people who I would have thought, I would have expected better. That is exactly the kind of spineless and unthinking garbage that we should never hear in our sphere. Because using your line of logic, Precious by itself, that's just a movie. And The Blind Side by itself, well, that was just a movie. And The Butler by itself is just a movie. And The Help was just a movie. And 12 Years a Slave was just a movie. And Hidden Figures was just a movie. And you get the idea. You had that recent Tarzan movie with Samuel Jackson, and here we are in 2016, 2017, whatever, and Jaimin Hansu running around with a bone in his nose. A bone in his nose? And this was a summer blockbuster that they did this in. This was not some small independent film that they figured would fly under the radar on Netflix. They put this out in international release. Seen everywhere. The white media thought that this was appropriate to put out in the so-called Age of Obama. And I got people trying to say that it's just one movie. Now, folks, it is exactly that kind of pathetic, unthinking, that kind of treasonous self-deception, which is how we came to be enslaved. And this is why our oppression has lasted for so long. And this is why we're still going through it. Black people have spent centuries, indeed millennia, making excuse after excuse for the inexcusable. Because using your logic, Philando Castile was just one black man killed by the police. Eric Garner was just one.
These are essential.
And Freddie Gray,
using them on
and
small
Sandra
animals,
Bland,
mind.
and Alpha Brazil,
Was
and
there
Tamir
anything
Rice,
else, or-
and Michael Brown, and Walter Scott, and Jamar Clark. You see, those were all just a bunch of one-offs, too. And they don't really matter in the grand scheme of things taken individually, except we are all willing to admit that these are not individual events. They are part of a string of murders, and that they are all related and part of a systematic, deliberate pattern of white hostility against us, and that we can't afford to pretend like those are isolated incidents.
These swamps and rivers host
Or rather, I guess those incidents are so severe, no one's willing to say that it's just one killing. All but the most stupid recognize it for what it is. But do you see how idiotic it sounds when you try to look at any particular incident in white supremacy and isolation? You got a society that's under complete control by one entity. That being the case, it is not unfair to say that in most cases you really can subscribe to a unified theory for things. Unified theory, for those of you who don't know, and I'm not going to recommend any books on it because I know you won't read them, but for any of you out there who wonder, unified theory basically means one cause for a whole bunch of things. You know, it's kind of like how white supremacy tries to have a unified theory about black people. It rained in Cincinnati today. Must be because of black people. But people who want to ignore reality, especially when they are under attack, when you see that the propaganda arm of white supremacy is taking aim at you, and you decide that you're going to go ahead and rationalize it away and say that it's okay regardless, that is not dangerous treasonous. People who are unable to read context into things, just big, simple stuff right in front of you, these people are also totally incapable of analyzing anything either. And what a surprise, these are the very people who insist on doing the most talking in our community. We got a lot of folks who speak when they most need to be quiet. They defend the very things that are openly mocking us, and mockery in the society toward an ethnic minority is dangerous because it always lays the foundation for attacks. White supremacy is constantly, whenever we hit back, which is few and far between, they will retreat, regroup, and come back from a different angle. They keep on trying. They keep putting the poison in a candy coating. And too many of us make excuses for it, and apparently can't see the problem with that. We refuse to see the clear patterns, no matter how obvious they are. We never call things out, and we never get wise to the scam. Now, since so many of you geeks like movies so much, perhaps you should have paid attention to a movie in particular that I cite a scene from, The Departed. Martin Sheen is recruiting Leonardo DiCaprio to be part of an undercover police unit, and he tells the young rookie, "We practice deception here, but what we don't practice is self-deception." All you geeks and Negro nerds and what have you who are making excuses for the mess that's coming down the pike next February, you guys fall in the latter category. You need to keep your eyes open. And in fact, you should get it tattooed on the inside of your eyelids. We don't practice self-deception. People who have conned themselves are very difficult to argue with. It's very difficult to convince them of reality. Primarily, it's because they bought into a con, and people tend to become emotionally invested in the decision they make. But the second reason is they're so hard to reach because they're gullible. And gullibility is not simply that you were deceived. A lot of people are deceived in a lot of things. Gullibility is a unique type of deception because of the fact that people who are gullible tend to be unusually susceptible to lies. For some reason, they tend to have an affinity for falsehoods. They just keep falling for it. They don't just easily believe the truth. They easily believe lies. That's the definition of gullible. It's somebody who can tell this idiot anything and he'll go for it. See, gullibility is where stuff like it's just one movie comes from. That's the kind of thinking that leads to a statement like that. None of these things is happening in a vacuum, folks. They are all part of a non-stop parade of black denigration. And any other time, these black geeks would acknowledge that. They usually do, but apparently they seem to think that white supremacy stops at the Marvel Cinematic Universe. White supremacy matters, white supremacy exists, that is, unless Captain America and Iron Man are part of it. So apparently, how nice to know the solution for white supremacy is Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans. If only we had known this sooner. The cure for white supremacy is Tony Stark. If only we had known this sooner. For 100 years, the white media's movies have produced a steady, non-stop drumbeat of images and stories that show black people as slaves, nannies, dumb brutes, and buffoons who need white people. Now, for years, we had all been in lockstep, more or less, saying that nothing under white supremacy, especially not the white media, is happening in isolation. That is a concerted effort being put out by an organized anti-black racist front. We understood that we were up against a coordinated effort being carried out by an organized group who know exactly what they're doing, and that no matter how benign they may claim these images and so-called stories are, that it is nothing but anti-black propaganda, full stop. We were all admitting that, hey, these ain't one-offs, this is part of an onslaught by the white media. But not anymore, though. Apparently all you gotta do is put Patrick Boseman in some spandex and have some CGI with him, and all of a sudden, well, that's different. This is different. That's what idiots said about Will Smith, too. Now, it's only now that some people are willing to admit that a lot of that stuff Will Smith's been doing is just straight up bootlegging. It may not have been the most ultra form, it's not as bad as some of the crap that we've seen from Tyler Perry, or some of the garbage that we saw from Bing Rames, but they don't change what the hell it is. Last time I checked, dog crap doesn't stink any worse than horse crap. But some of you seem to think the horse crap smells sweeter than most. Those slave and black subservient movies that I listed, they are part of the effort by the white media to indoctrinate, and the indoctrination has clearly taken. These are 24 frames per second, big budget, star-studded, anti-black propaganda films. They are put out by the most powerful men in media. Who the hell do you think the Weinsteins are? Who the hell do you think Disney is? Oh, so Disney is racist, but they put out the Princess Frog. You can't have a black prince there. Disney is racist, but they don't have black people in any of their kids' fair. Oh, but they're not racist when they have black people running around in grass skirts and plate lips. Well, just so long as it's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You cannot compare the output of even new black media to what's put out by the white media studios. Because when you try to claim that it's just one movie, you're ignoring reality. A reality that up until this last week you used to acknowledge. And the fact that you would claim anything in the white media is happening in a vacuum ought to make you pause before giving your opinion in the future. If you got this one wrong, then simply put your blind in the dark. Brothers and sisters, it is not wise for us to go listening to every Tom, Dick, and Harriet who claims to be on our side. Everyone says that they want off the plantation, but it's not until after you tell them that they have to leave, and they realize, I gotta make my own butter biscuits, and I gotta make my own chitlins. Then you find out who really wants off the plantation as opposed to who just wants massa to be a little less brutal towards them. The goal of black empowerment is not to have less white supremacy or to have less anti-black violence. The goal of black empowerment is to have none whatsoever. It's to get rid of it. It's to eradicate white supremacy, to eradicate anti-black anything. Now, Dr. John Henrik Clarke once related the old tale about the boy who saw his grandmother churning butter. And since butter churners are essentially buckets that don't allow you to see what's going on inside, the boy, naturally curious, asked his grandmother, which churn is it that's the one that produces the butter? Now, to this little boy, that seemed to be an intelligent question. It's cute coming from a child because he doesn't know. But to him, it just makes sense that, well, it must be one in particular that does the magic, right? And his grandmother had to warn him, no, grandson,
I'm a happy man.
it's all of them that produce the butter. Which one produces the butter?
Yes,
they
beggars
all
can't be choosers.
do. White supremacy, anti-black racism is the exact same
This
way.
is good quality.
It's no one
Excellent. Thank you.
incident, no one person, no one movie that produces white supremacy. They all do. You have to see it as part of a whole because that's how the bad guys see it. Kevin Feige tells you that he's got Marvel Phase 1, Marvel Phase 2, Marvel Phase 3. He has DisneyCon where they hold an entire convention telling you slow coasts that, hey, we got a plan laid out, a roadmap. You have the people who used to work on those Marvel movies like Joss Whedon and like John Favreau saying, hey, I had to leave because they put us in a straitjacket. They were dictating to us what we could and could not do. We had simple ideas, simple things we wanted to do, things that would not have changed direction from the Infinity War, and Marvel said, forget it, we're not doing anything. They were dictating terms to people. And yet a lot of you still lie and say, well, Ryan Coogler and that black screenwriter on Black Panther, look at his, white, by the way. Well, these guys, they got to write whatever they want. It was written by a black man. No, it wasn't. The way that movies work, and I'm going to reiterate this for those of you who don't know, movies primarily begin with a producer. Now, the producer can either be a studio executive, or in the case of, say, like Jerry Bruckheimer, he could be an independent man with enough clout that studios will listen to. The way that it works is a studio executive or a producer has the idea for the movie. And what he will do is he will essentially get the studio to say, we like this idea. And from there, he is given a small amount of money to go recruit a screenwriter to write the actual script based on the producer's idea. What do you think the producer does? The screenwriter is approached by the producer. It's very rare in Hollywood these days, especially in the era of tentpoles. It's very difficult for a screenwriter to say, here's my script, will you make it a movie? Now, after the producer has what he feels to be an adequate enough first draft, he then presents that to the studio, and they will, quote-unquote, green light the movie. That means now they're ready to go into development. They're going to start commissioning more drafts for the writer, and they always give notes. For those of you who don't know anything about the movie business and desperately wish you did, that's what they do. They give you notes. No screenwriter is allowed to just write whatever the hell he wants. As you turn in one draft after the other, the studio will give you notes telling you this is what you're going to change now. That's how the movie business actually works. You don't get to write what you want. And when you're a director, what happens is you have dailies. The dailies are sent to the studio so they can see what the hell it is you're doing. And the producer will either be whispering in your ear, psst, this won't cut. What that means is there's going to be editing problems. Or if the studio executives, they'll look and say, we got to make some more notes on the production of the movie itself. Now, you would know this if you actually read interviews with directors themselves. DVDs have commentaries from the directors. They talk about it all the time. Screenwriters who have commentaries on DVD talk about it all the time. You can see interviews on YouTube with the screenwriters talking about how the process actually works. But most of you don't know and don't care. And yet you open your mouths to talk anyway. You don't know how the movies that you watch get made. Oh, but you will tell us how they get made. You just don't know how. That's all. See, it is dangerous for you to go listening to people who don't know a damn thing. To have your sensibilities informed by the ignorant, the willfully ignorant, the hopelessly gullible. Critical thinking is not a skill that's widely practiced or cherished in our community. Even among those who practice it, not many do it well. But since we live in an age where
sweet Jesus, get the fuck up, man!
Famous being a moron, everyone seems to think that giving their uninformed opinion is the same as giving an irrefutable fact. And it's not. A slap to the face isn't that serious, so long as it's one, right? But how about 2 slaps to the face? How about 2 in a single day? Or how about 1 slap every day of the week? At what point do you draw the line? When do we say that, this might be something we should take seriously? Where's the line? And I'd love to know, because it's interesting how all these geeks can't tell it. Now, remember what I said about there is no line that white supremacy can cross that these geeks would consider to be too far? There is no point at which they would draw the line in the sand and say, white supremacy cannot step over this line. There's no line for them. White supremacy can just keep on marching. And indeed it has. Now there's one brother, not calling any names, no need to. I'm speaking to principles here, not people. But there was one brother in particular who said something that I could not believe, because I would have thought he would have known better. He said that we shouldn't excoriate the Black Panther movie because apparently even criticizing it is to give it publicity. Now that, as Dr. Jake Diop once said, I suppose that makes a certain amount of sense, not that it makes makes good sense. If all publicity is good publicity, then tell me, how did that Fantastic Four movie with Michael B. Jordan pan out? Because you see, there were a lot of people who were absolutely livid about that one, lost their minds about that. They raised, a lot of white geeks raised pure hell about that. So, all publicity is essentially good publicity because it all adds to the notoriety of a film. Makes it where people hear about it, right? So the Fantastic Four movie was a blockbuster, now wasn't it? Oh, that's right, it died over opening weekend. You see, the bad guys waged open racist war on that, and it didn't do so well, right? I'm using your logic here. See, the pale males got in line and they attacked. If any publicity is essentially good publicity, which the argument that this person made in essence, then I'm sure that Nick Parker will enjoy his next big budget project, right? Because he had a lot of publicity, a lot of people talking about the birth of a nation. So a lot of people talking about it was essentially helping that film, right? See, this is part of the problem that we have. You got a lot of people who basically have a debate strategy, a thought process of fire, ready, aim. That's not the way that you analyze anything. Not an individual event, and not a macrocosm either. See, this isn't about what the dominant society is going to do. It's about what we are going to do. Those of us who have proven that we understand the past and can accurately predict where trends are going, we're the voices to be listened to. Others making excuses for the status quo should not be listened to. The situation is too serious for us to do other things. If I see something that is wrong, I don't make excuses. I attack it. That's called principle. There are no sacred cows for me under white supremacy. Because too many sacred cows are nothing more than white cave beasts in a freaking cow's skin. I'm ready to turn all sacred cows to hamburger. And you should be too. Do not trust anything that comes to you from any of the arms of white supremacy. If the administrative arm says we got ourselves a 13th Amendment here, and all of y'all niggers is free, don't believe it. If they say, hey, here's the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and hey, here's a follow-up in 65, see, all of you niggers can vote now, don't believe it. The white media says, hey, here's a vision of a colorblind world where racism doesn't exist. Everyone's judged by the quality of their character, not the color of their skin, don't believe it. If the police say, we are highly trained and we don't racially profile, don't believe it. Perhaps it's because I'm of a certain age, but I don't make excuses for what I see. Now, millennials grew up on escapist fantasy. The faux colorblind nonsense that was started in the 1960s. It died out shortly after the death of Dr. King and kind of had this miasma in the 1970s. The Black Panthers and such kind of kept it at bay. The white colorblind garbage was criminal for a decade. But starting with the ascendancy of Ronald Senile Reagan, the white media felt, okay, it's time to go ahead and start ginning up the old propaganda machine. So in the 1980s and 90s, the escapist fantasy reached a fever pitch, and a lot of you were born and raised on that nonsense. And it's obvious that while some of us were getting into news from an early age, while some of us had parents who didn't park us in front of the electronic babysitter, while some of us had parents who required us to read and to watch something other than cartoons and didn't let cartoons become our friends, while we were taught to question and mistrust the white media, you younger cats were taught to worship it. You were allowed for white supremacy to creep into your mind. What's that old saying about the eyes are the windows of the soul? The problem is the window goes both ways. The eyes allow people to see what's going on inside of you, but it also allows other people to put ideas inside your head. And that's exactly what's happening. Many of you who unfortunately do not think before you speak and use words without bothering to figure out what they actually mean, you say things and it's clear that you don't know what you're talking about because you'll say, well, these movies, I need it as a diversion. Do you even know what that word means? Yeah, it means means that basically I need to have something else. No, what diversion means is an instance of turning something aside from its course. An instance. But the secondary definition is an alternate route, when the usual road is temporarily closed. That's what diversion means. What it means is I'm supposed to be doing some work out in the woodshed. I'm supposed to be doing some architectural work, but it's a little bit tedious for me. You know, kind of got some brain fatigue going on. So I'm going to take a break. It's going to be something aside from the course, but I'm going to get back on track. That's what diversion means. Diversion does not mean that I'm going to go ahead and take this side road and stay on it, and I'm going to go somewhere else entirely. What it means is I'm getting off the road for an instance. I'm not going to be staying off the road. You see, I guess the problem for me is I look at everything through the prism of how does it serve my own personal interest. When I look at the media, I'm not looking at going, ooh, I need some more fun time, some more leisure time. That is one of the big psychological loopholes that human beings have. Once we start goofing off, we tend to want to stay goofing off. Work is hard, play is easy. Now we prefer play because why put out more effort than you have to? Might as well do something that you truly enjoy from beginning to end as opposed to something that you'll only enjoy once it's finished. That's dangerous because oppressors will turn that against you. They'll make it where the only real thing you can do other than when they're beating you with a whip is going to be goofing off. You better not be planning how you're going to get that whip out of masses' hands, though. When I look at the media, any sort of media, am I able to enjoy? Because a lot of you are bitching and complaining because you're children in your mentality. And you go, well, you probably don't like nothing, do you? Now, how the hell can you say that when I've told you that I like the TV show Deadwood? It had problems, but I have problems with all white media, by the way, because of its source. But I told you that I like Deadwood. I told you that I grew up watching Transformers, and that was my favorite cartoon as a child. And I told you that there are also movies that I can quote to you from liberally. I know the names of screenwriters. See, you actually needed me to tell you the names of these people. You didn't know who the hell they were. Alright? I actually, believe it or not, I follow all of this media stuff so I can dissect it. I'm aware of media, I consume media, but I don't invest in media. Because I understand that all media, I see media from the same standpoint as the people who produce the media. You know, those white guys who are not about to let you show up white with grass skirts with plate lips. The white people who tell you that it's just a movie and they put that idiotic line in your mouth and you just regurgitate it without thinking. The same white people who have been putting out images denigrating us for 100 years in media. The same ones who declared T.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation to be the greatest film of all time, the American Film Institute. I see things from their perspective in that I look at media as only being useful to the extent that it can promote my power. A TV show is fine. Having a sci-fi show or a sci-fi movie is fine, but only to the extent that it promotes my value system. If a particular program or a particular work does not promote my value system, then it is meaningless. At best, it's empty calories, which means I really ought to be doing something else. Or at worst, it is an intolerable offense that I must call out and must attack. But it's a binary equation. Do I look at this and see things that forward my value system? If not, then what the hell am I doing? See, a lot of you were allowed to grow into this bad behavior. You were coddled and allowed to go ahead and chase after media that mocks and ridicules you and continues white supremacy through its propaganda army. You never were taught to challenge it, and now here you are openly defending it. You were indoctrinated with this garbage from infancy. I, on the other hand, was not. To me, nothing in media is acceptable except that which promotes my power. Sure, you can have an engrossing storyline. Sure, you can have interesting characters. Sure, you can have exciting and dynamic set pieces, and you can have some flashy, razzle-dazzle CGI. But if you've got a black bootlick, or a black buffoon, or a black woman who's sitting here kissing some white dude's feet, that, to me, gets the point across that this is not a piece of media that needs to exist. And you have black people in their 20s and 30s, who I guess because they're out of their underoos, well, at least publicly anyway, they figure because they're not in middle school anymore, they think they sound smart defending this crap. That's the danger here. It would be one thing if you were kids, but I guess because you figure, well, I'm not a child anymore, yeah, at least not physically. I'm in my 20s. What are you talking about? I'm in my 30s. I'm in my 30s. How you gonna question me? I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, just like the elders in the black community whose word ain't worth a damn because they don't think, you fall in the same sad category now. The white media taught you all of that mealy-mouthed crap that you say, and it presented it to you in your childhood as being a moral position, and it's not. The white media had a vested interest in teaching oppressed people that you ought to take the gentle path, take the high road. You don't want to lay blame on anything. So you really should give everything a pass. We don't want to be judgmental. Well, except for somebody who comes along and says we need to have standards. Now, you can be very declarative on that. Always equivocating. You need to look up that word, by the way. I know you won't, so I'll do it for you. Equivocate means to use ambiguous language so as to conceal the truth or avoid committing oneself. And that has been exactly what you've done regarding this Black Panther movie and geek culture in general. And that's the reason why I'm going to link it to the larger subject of geek culture where blacks are concerned. Black Panther, my criticism of it just opened a floodgate. You didn't just defend that movie, you defended everything about geek culture just all across the board. All of it's okay. You're imitating your white counterparts. You see, they have the luxury of waffling on issues because nobody's attacking them. But when it comes time to choose a side and squad up, they always choose white, while you're still trying to walk the middle of the road. See, they don't play that game of, well, we've got to be non-judgmental and everything is everything. They're like, no. They didn't do that with the Fantastic Four movie. Didn't do that with the Birth of a Nation. You see, if nothing is unacceptably wrong to you, then that also means nothing can be absolutely right either. That is a surefire formula for maintaining the status quo in perpetuity. Now, a lot of you out there, you younger guys, because you've been listening to people like myself who have our hands on straight, you just learned that maybe you should excoriate the baby boomers because they wasted years that amounted to decades chasing dreams of integration. They've been on a 70-year-long vacation from reality. They just have these delusions that one day they were going to join this or that white fraternity or sorority, the Elks Club, whatever. There are white folks over here who are going to let me in one of these days. I'm as good as them. I just need them to understand that I'm as good as them. Well, as the baby boomers die off, they waste their last pathetic breath still pursuing this fool's errand. Now, we fully understand them as so pathetic. They chased a mirage since they were young, and now they're all but dead. And nothing to show for it. Even their children don't respect them. But apparently some of you are too tense to understand that you've gone and done the exact same thing. History has now repeated itself. You grew up wanting to be a Marvel superhero, or to be one of the characters that you saw in a Japanese cartoon. Or at the very least, if you couldn't get that, you'd settle for being the black sidekick. Just let me be part of your story world, please. And now you're adults, still chasing that mirage, and like the boomers, you're not going to have anyone tell you that there's something wrong with that. I don't know, maybe here's the analogy that I'm going to go ahead and use. We'll see if this one flies over your heads. Let's say that there's a house, and the house belongs to a couple of white guys named Stan and Jack. Now, Stan, and Jack Kirby, Jack, they don't allow any black people in their house, though they do have a couple of pictures of black people up in their house. And outside the house stand some black misfits who played with their Power Ranger toys a little bit too long, They see some of the Bip Bam Pow stuff going on inside of the house that Stan and Jack built. And it's all stuff that's done with resources stolen from the people outside, but the people outside never conned on to this. They never figured out the scam. And they look at what's going on inside the house that Stan and Jack built, and they're envious. Now, Stan and Jack aren't about to let you in their house. You can't influence a single thing that goes on inside of it. You haven't gotten one thin dime from that house. They don't listen to you, and they're not going to. And the closest thing to a black person in their house are a couple of very small pictures of black people, which are there as an afterthought, and never as large as the ones of white guys on the wall. That point seems to always be lost on you. And yet these black people who are on the outside, who are largely ignored by the two white guys in the house, and who can't influence anything inside the house, they have somehow convinced themselves that what's going on inside the house that Stan and Jack built somehow has something to do with them. And that's really amazing, considering that they're acting like they're getting paid to adore what's going on inside of Stan and Jack's house. As if Marvel's success, the house that Stan and Jack built success, is theirs too. Stan and Jack aren't about to let you into their house. All you can do is stand outside and wish you were one of the tiny black pictures at the bottom of their wall. So Professor Truth comes along and tells you to stop idolizing people who mistreat you and denigrate you. Professor Truth tells you that it's not right that you should stand outside in the cold, giving your money to people who ignore you and mock you with a smile on their faces. I tell you that you're able to build your own house, and that you can have your own pictures on those walls, and you can have things going on inside your house a hell of a lot better than anything going on inside the house that Jack and Stan built. I tell you that it's your duty to build your own house so that you would have one of your own, that you need to have one of your own. And what's the reply that we get from these dumb geeks? You just don't want us to have anything, huh? Wow, I tell you to get your own house, get your own pictures, get your own events, and the first thing you say is, you don't want me to have anything. Well, this is the kind of garbage that we hear from self-professed adults. I tell you to build your own house, and you say, well, that's not having anything. Ah, now you sense truth now. You've gone ahead and told me exactly what's going on inside your empty head. You've made a confession. If you're not able to drool in front of Stan and Jack's house, as far as you're concerned, you don't have anything at all. That's the confession you just got through making. Look at the comment section from the people in the other video that I did about Black Panther, and that's the main thing that you see. And some of these people who call themselves posting reply, this is one of the lines that they use. Well, you just don't want us to have anything. No, I want you to have one of your own. That's exactly the problem. You don't have